How can we raise the number of positive synchronicities in our lives and diminish the number of times things seem to go against us? These are some of the issues we'll be taking up in this session and the one that follows. I urge you to listen closely because I believe these are some of the most interesting and most practical areas of synchrodestiny. Everything that happens in this world happens at the expense of something else. In fact, it happens at the expense of an almost infinite number of other things. For example, what I am doing right now takes place because millions of other potential events are being excluded. For example, there's a theoretical possibility that the chair I'm sitting on will suddenly fall apart in the next 5 seconds, and there may even be an alternate universe in which it actually does fall apart. But it now appears that in this universe, at least the possibility of my chair falling apart has been excluded by the probability that it will hold together. In terms of synchrodestiny, every potential event has 2 very important attributes. There is the possibility that it will happen, and there is also the possibility that it won't. The mathematical expression of an event's probability is called a probability amplitude, and every potential event has one. For example, the probability amplitude of anyone winning the lottery is very low. The probability amplitude of winning the lottery without buying a ticket is even lower, but it still exists, and we could imagine a scenario in which someone wins the lottery without buying a ticket. It might involve a great many synchronicities, but it theoretically could take place. On the other hand, the probability of not winning the lottery is very high, and it's even higher if you don't buy a ticket. There's also another dimension to probability which is very important for synchrodestiny. This is the number of ways in which an event can happen, as opposed to simply whether it happens or not. For instance, when you get into your car in the morning, the probability amplitude is very high that you'll enter through the door on the driver's side. But you might also enter through the door on the passenger side. There are circumstances that might cause you to do that, and they have a relatively low probability amplitude. And there's also the possibility that you might climb into your car through one of the windows, or even by cutting a hole in the roof. But all those potential events would lead up to the same conclusion, which would be getting behind the wheel of your car. In your own life, what determines the probability amplitude that any specific event will take place? The answer is clearly related to the dimension of probability we were just discussing. If you maximize the number of ways the event can take place, you increase the probability that it will in fact happen. But if you don't do anything to increase the number of ways, the opposite is true. Once again, it's just like the lottery. If you buy 1 ticket, the probability amplitude of your winning is very low. If you buy 2 tickets, you increase the probability amplitude. And if you buy millions of tickets, the possibility of winning eventually starts to turn into a likelihood. It even becomes a certainty if you buy every single ticket that's been printed. Let's look at a more detailed example. Suppose you have the desire to become an opera singer. Every night before you go to sleep, you fantasize about taking your bows on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera. But this is more of an ego-based desire than a real intention, so it has very little effect on the conscious energy field. It does very little to raise the probability that you really will become an opera star. But what if you start taking voice lessons? That's an obvious step in the right direction, but it would have a tremendous effect on the probability amplitude. So suppose you said to me, Deepak, I really want to become an opera star. And I said to you, well, maybe you should take some voice lessons. But then suppose you said, oh no, I couldn't do that because when I was in 7th grade, somebody laughed at me when I sang the national anthem. Now, in a very simple way, this can be seen as an example of karmic conditioning. Karma, remember, is interpretation. Someone laughed at you when you sang the national anthem, and you interpret that to mean that you shouldn't sing anymore because the same thing will probably happen again. Another person might interpret the same event to mean they should run out and take voice lessons. but your interpretation dictates an avoidance response. So at this point, your karmic conditioning has brought you to a certain point. You'd like to take bows on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera, but you're afraid to take voice lessons. Whenever anyone suggests you take voice lessons, you flash back to that episode in the 7th grade and you say, "Oh no, I can't do that." And I think we can say that as long as this particular cycle of memory and response continues, the probability amplitude of your becoming an opera singer is going to remain very low. In order to really change this situation, you've got to break free of your present karmic conditioning. You've got to change your interpretation of what happens in your life. This has to happen not only in the obvious areas such as your attitude toward voice lessons, but also in your fundamental ideas about how things happen and how desires are turned into realities. You've got to transform yourself not only in terms of whether you practice singing or watch television or eat donuts. Transformation also happens in your soul. In every area of our lives, the soul gives meaning and the soul takes action. And the soul uses the brain to make those things happen. Meaning comes from karma, and karma is just experience, a past experience of any kind. When you remember any experience, the memory of that experience is giving rise to an interpretation. And that's what meaning is. It's an interpretation. But is it a true interpretation or is it an untrue interpretation? That's a very subjective question. We can certainly say it's true for you because you have made that interpretation based on past experience. So the meaning is karmically generated. An experience took place which you interpreted based on your individual perspective. All the memories of everything that's happened to you have brought you to this perspective and this instant of time. And this has led you to interpret things in a certain way. And from this interpretation, you've derived the meaning. Interpretation, meaning, memory, desire, all of these are very closely connected. These are the components of the karmic cycle, and these directly influence the state of your soul. I really want to emphasize this because it's very important for synchrodestiny. Every thought that you have is either an interpretation or a desire. There are no other kinds of thoughts. Every thought that we have is an interpretation or a desire, and one is the function of the other. Without the desire, there's no karma. Without karma, there is no memory. Without memory, there is no interpretation or meaning. Without the meaning, there is no desire, and the cycle goes on. Bundles of memories, desires, meanings, all of which are manifest in every cell of your body and in every idea in your mind. When you attach a meaning to an event, it is true for you because it is literally summoned forth from a subconscious memory bank. An event occurs in space and time. You interpret it, you give it meaning, you act in accordance with the meaning, and the full cycle of karma starts over again. Right now, you're listening to my voice. How has it come about that I'm making this recording now and you're listening to it at some future time? It's karma that has brought you and I together in this unique way. Thousands and thousands of events and memories and desires have created this moment. Thousands and thousands of synchronicities lie behind it. When we meet in a space-time event like this, we've come through different routes, and that's been going on for eons of time. Yet, we meet here. So that's why this moment and every moment is karmically significant. Because people arrive at the same point along different karmic journeys, and the last thought we have before our death is the culmination of our karmic passage. That's the last point we arrive at in this incarnation. That's the thought that then takes us on the onward journey. For most people, the same karmic pattern is repeated in the same way throughout their lives. But why is that? There's an easy one-word answer: habit. We just get used to a certain way of doing things, so we do the same thing every day. Habit becomes karma, and karma becomes habit, simply because it's comfortable. Those patterns are the basis for the probability amplitudes of what's going to happen in your life. Your habits, your conditioned karmic behaviors define the statistical likelihood for what's going to take place. For most people, the statistical likelihood is that today is going to be the same as yesterday and tomorrow is going to be the same as today. And for as long as that's true, there's really no chance for growth, no chance for evolution into higher states of consciousness.